Good morning. This is Bob Turner. I would like to welcome you to the third in a series of webinars on the Interstate Passport initiative. As with previous two webinars, this webinar is being recorded. It will be available at the URL that is noted by the first bullet point on this slide, and it will be available starting tomorrow. If you do have questions while the webinar is in progress, please either type your question into the question box, and it will be brought to the presenter's attention, though we are going to wait until the end of the webinar to answer all questions. And finally, we really would appreciate it if after this webinar you would please take the time to fill out a quick survey. We have gained a lot of information and hopefully improved the webinars based on the survey responses that we've received to the first two webinars. Working backwards in time, the second of these webinars was aimed directly at registrars and institutional researchers because it was specific to the passport tracking mechanism. This is a method for tracking the progress of students that transfer with the passport and thereby keeping an eye on the quality of their preparation. That second webinar is available at the same URL as the first bullet point. The first webinar provided background and an overview of the passport. It can also be accessed at that URL. That webinar described the passport as a learning outcomes-based interstate transfer process with the goal of eliminating repetition of academic work after students transfer. Today's webinar is going to focus on the role of transfer-level proficiency criteria in the passport framework. I will present a few slides that provide some context for the comments that will be given to us by Terry Underwood, and I will give you some background with respect to Terry after the initial introduction to the passport. So the passport is, we will do the following items in the webinar. I'll give you a brief overview, and Terry will then address the passport proficiency criteria, telling what they are, how they were developed, and how you can use them. The Interstate Passport is a learning outcomes-based transfer framework, and the goal of the passport is to reduce unnecessary repetition of academic work after students transfer, thereby hopefully improving graduation rates, shortening the time to degree, and saving students money. We are, however, very interested in keeping a focus on ensuring quality while we're streamlining the pathway to graduation. The passport contains and focuses on 9 lower division general education areas. These are derived from the LEAP essential learning outcomes and from research by WICHE into the general education areas that predominate in the WICHE states. There are 3 areas of foundational skills of oral communication, written communication, and quantitative literacy. There are also 4 areas that cover some knowledge of concepts in creative expression, natural science, human cultures, and human society and the individual. And in addition, the final 2 areas, which are cross-cutting skills in critical thinking and teamwork and value systems. In each of these areas, faculty have come together from a number of states and established passport learning outcomes and proficiency criteria. So these have been established by faculty with expertise in one of the 9 areas that we just pointed out, and we're going to give one example from critical thinking of the learning outcomes and proficiency criteria. So a passport learning outcome, one of the learning outcomes in critical thinking, is that a student should, the learning outcome is a statement of what students must know or be able to do to attain lower division general education proficiency. The proficiency criteria, on the other hand, state an assignment that is currently being used for students to show transfer level proficiency. And I need to emphasize right off the top that the proficiency criteria are not requirements, they're not recommendations, they're not expectations, they are reports of assignments that are currently in use. For this particular learning outcome, one of the learning outcomes is that a student should identify a problem or a question and its component parts. So that's one of the learning outcomes in a critical thinking area. A corresponding proficiency criteria, that is an assignment that is currently being used by students to show transfer level proficiency, is that a student might be required to do a case study in business ethics. The statement of that assignment is that a student will identify what decisions a corporation might consider about producing snack foods made with fats. So those are that's the difference between the learning outcomes and the proficiency criteria. And today we're fortunate to hear from Dr. Terry Underwood. Terry is one of the architects of the passport structure. Terry is the person who pointed out that the learning outcomes need to be augmented by these concrete descriptions of passport student proficiency or readiness. And it was he who guided the development by faculty of these descriptions. These are the passport proficiency criteria. By way of introduction, I'll tell you about two of Terry's formative experiences. In the mid-1970s, when Terry was a graduate student TA, he worked with a prof who wondered why it is that if you asked 10 different English instructors to grade the same set of 300 essays, no essay would earn an A from all instructors, and some essays would earn a grade that ranged from A to F. As we now know from the work of Paul Dietrich at the Educational Testing Services, during the same time period, it's because the instructors are looking for different qualities in the essays. They're looking at them as they would look at student work in response to their own assignments and to their own expectations. And the point is that grading is always contextual, thus the rise of ubiquitous rubrics to balance this equation. The proficiency criteria are in this sense a rubric. That is, they provide a way to expand the local context for assessment by providing clear examples of assignments used in other contexts. In the mid-2000s, Terry worked as the University Assessment Coordinator at California State University at Sacramento. And there he worked with faculty from 7 different colleges to help them make use of assignments they were already using in order to harvest assessment data for other purposes. So Terry spent several years working with small groups of faculty from across the curriculum to tie their already existing assignments to institutional learning outcomes and to help them figure out ways of capturing defensible evidence of learning for accreditation without extensively modifying their teaching or taking up too much of their time. It's clear that Terry has considerable recent experience with universal accreditation, institutional accreditation in higher ed. So one of the original activities that is conducted when we talk about the passport is to ask, why are you here? And how did you get connected to the passport? So Terry, let me ask you that question. Why are you here and how did you get connected to the passport?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bob. I appreciate that. I appreciate the chance to talk about this topic. And I also want to welcome everybody to this discussion, and I hope that this is just the beginning of many more. My connection, well, it happened around 2010, what I think of now as the light bulb experience. I was just finishing up a stint as University Assessment Coordinator. I was in a meeting with Deborah David, who was the pilot state facilitator for the Passport project in California, and she was just sort of briefing us on this this new project that was coming up. And you know, people were saying, "Oh, another project. Who can we get to do this?" It took about 5 minutes before the light bulb went off, and I told Deborah that you can count me in. In fact, I had been waiting for the opportunity to have discussions about assignments that professors are actually giving across institutional boundaries for years and years and years, and here it was. So here I am, Bob.
So you have a long-standing interest in these kinds of assignments. But how did you get interested in issues of transfer?
Well, I think transfer to me is a core challenge, not just in higher education, but across all aspects of education. I've long been interested in transfer. I taught fourth grade, I taught middle school, I taught a little in high school, I taught community college. I have a view of this system from the bottom up. You want to go to the next slide, Bob?
Yeah.
Readiness for transfer. How do we know if one student is ready and another is not? Well, we have to transfer students across levels everywhere. In kindergarten, there's a transfer from the home to the school. And one of the things about the Passport that I appreciate is Passport takes advantage of the notion of trust. We trust schools that they're going to take these kindergartners in and they're going to do well by them. Then academic promotion and failure. Every year that a child is in elementary school, at the end of the year there's the decision about whether to go ahead or stay back, and that's a type of transfer. Middle school is one big transfer station. I was there for 5 years. I can tell you the whole purpose is to transition kids from elementary school to high school, and then when they get to high school, there's another period where we're trusting the teacher to grade the students accurately in pre-approved courses, and they're socialized for higher education. And then the big transfer admission to college, and we trust admissions officers and everybody else to admit those students who are ready. And then within college, admission to upper division, and this really is where this particular project is focused. How do we know that a student is ready to move from lower division to upper division work? That's part of the job of the Passport. As far as I know, no one has ever put together a set of actual assignments across the whole lower division curriculum, and we have.
Right, and Terry, it's worth pointing out that the Passport has an emphasis on interstate transfer, but it's also applicable to transfer within states. It seeks to bring an additional strategy to this trust table to help a specific set of students, that is, those who want to transfer across state lines. And it's based on learning outcomes. We trust that proficiency is attained, but without syllabus review, although the Passport has no objection to syllabus review if states and districts use it. Terry, another question I have for you that might go to the heart of the matter. Why should anyone trust the Interstate Passport to serve as evidence that a student is ready for upper division work?
Well, I think, in addition to the fact that trust is built into the fabric of education from the ground up, one thing that bolsters trust in the Passport, apart from the tracking that you've mentioned, is we have the proficiency criteria, and those are written by faculty. When you think about the curriculum, there are essentially 3 core questions that I think need to be addressed. I want to talk about those 3 questions and then talk about the Passport response. First one, what learning is most valued? We have that conversation has been going on for maybe 20 years now in higher ed, maybe longer. The second question, who decides? And then the third question, how do we know when it has been achieved? I mean, those are 3 sort of central questions across all levels. And the Passport response, if you look at those photos, those are groups of faculty. The upper left-hand corner, we have natural science. Those people all teach natural science courses. On the right, we have, what is that? The human cultures group. And there are actually 9 groups, and they all are actual teachers. The Interstate Passport response, what learning is most valued? The faculty decide that. Who decides that? The faculty. How do we know when it has been achieved? The faculty. tell us? There are lots of ways to answer this question, but the way the Passport has selected is to go to the faculty.
Right, and as I pointed out, and you have also, the Passport decided to collect examples of assignments from lower division GE courses, and those assignments link to learning outcomes, and the assignment should be at just the right level of difficulty for students who are ready to go to upper division work. Can you give us a few examples of some of these assignments, Terry?
Sure. And these come right from the Passport matrices themselves. The first one, at the completion of an in-class teamwork exercise, students identify a minimum of 4 key aspects of teamwork that influence behaviors during the activity. The identification could be through class discussion, journals, reports, or worksheets. Now, this comes from the teamwork group. It's really cross-curricular, maybe even co-curricular. Students debate the merits of essential theories of sociology, for example, structural functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism with regard to a study of poverty. We could change the content and it could relate to anthropology or some other discipline.
And that one all falls within the human cultures area.
Yes, yes. And then the next one is from creative expression. In a paper, presentation, or exam, identify how a given work, artist, or a movement influence the creative work of others. Now, in that matrix, there's no requirement that students create original art, but that doesn't mean that they can't. If you want to assign that, that's fine. Students compare and contrast the plum pudding model and modern theory of the atom. This is a good example of one group of faculty speaking directly to another group. This is the science faculty, and we assume that the science faculty know the plum pudding model and the modern theory of the atom, and they're talking to one another.
Terry, these assignments all seem really doable, and I'm sure that faculty everywhere already do something like these assignments. So a question that comes up is, why did the Interstate Passport not generate a set of ideal assignments or exemplars that faculty must or are encouraged to use, or make them that might make them stretch them to do better?
Well, I think the bottom line answer is that we really weren't interested in looking at the best of the best of the best. We were looking at collecting examples that communicate, that one faculty group in one context can look at and say, yes, that's like something we do here. We don't want to evaluate them. An example is not an exemplar necessarily. An example is a typical thing, not a model, not an ideal. An example is descriptive. It's not prescriptive. It's not designed for replication. It just is. It's authentic. Above all, these are not contrived, they're not artificial. These are assignments, examples of assignments that are real. And one of many, not exhaustive. That's critical. In fact, it would be possible to add lots of more examples to these lists.
Well, I think that the distinction between examples and exemplars is really significant for folks to understand as they become close to considering becoming a Passport institution. We don't mean to say that these are the only or the best assignments, but they are real assignments that faculty use, that faculty trust as a way of getting their students ready for transfer. Terry, can you describe for us how these subject area or the lower division GE area teams work to produce the proficiency criteria?
Yeah, first of all, we started off with, we had writing teams, and the writing teams were selected by the state facilitators, and they came together. They were made up of faculty. Everybody working on a writing team was currently teaching and carrying curricular responsibility for that particular outcome. And each of the teams ultimately selected a chair. Actually, there were 2 phases. There was writing the learning outcomes, that was done, and then the second phase, writing the performance criteria. And I think in almost all cases it was pretty much the same team that wrote both parts. The writing process itself was worked in two phases: the learning outcomes first, the performance criteria next. One thing that was interesting was these faculty were from across the states, they were from across levels, they were from across disciplines. In fact, this was the first time I had heard the term metadisciplinary. We went through a traditional writing process. There was pre-writing that went on in the states where within the states they collected examples of potential proficiency criteria. Then there was a face-to-face writing meeting that took place over a 2-day period, up to say 8 hours of face-to-face time actually crafting these assignments. The rewriting part of it, once the face-to-face meeting was over, a draft was produced and was sent back out to colleagues in the States, and we got feedback and we held conference calls to incorporate the feedback and to make the proficiency criteria look like what we were hearing from the field. And then the publishing of the documents. It was the faculty group itself that decided when the document was ready to publish, and people within that group needed to agree, yes, we could live with this set of proficiency criteria.
Yeah, Terry, I can confirm what you've just said about excuse me, the process since I was present at the proficiency criteria writing meetings and almost every team conference call. It was easier said than done. It took a while for the faculty to get to the point that they were freely generating examples. And we didn't expect this part of the work to be quite that challenging. Terry, can you describe some of the challenges and what we did to get the work to progress?
Yeah, the face-to-face meetings actually went pretty smoothly, but it was in the conference calls. Early on, we saw that the faculty would start to look at these criteria as mandates or requirements, and so we tried to head them off at the pass and create just examples. So if you look at this document, this is an internal document from winter 2012. Guidelines for the proficiency criteria writing teams. How do you go about doing this? Well, the role of these criteria is to clarify understandings among faculty regarding what it means for a student to have completed lower division general education requirements. Clarify understandings, not modify your assignments, not change anything, but to clarify understandings.
Yeah, I did face some of those concerns during the early conference calls. I remember hearing quite distinctly questions such as, these are really mandates, aren't they? Or we're going to be required or expected to do these assignments, right? And you know, kind of what is the real agenda? And when are you going to start telling us the assessments we must use? So that sort of mistrust kind of became a real elephant in the room. And Terry, you gave a lot of thought to changing things so that the conference calls could be more productive in less time. And so what did you do?
Yeah, I think the use of the elephant is apt, Bob. For a long time, we didn't see this elephant. I mean, we knew that it was there, but we couldn't quite figure out what it was. The early conference calls lasted for over an hour. Usually we were scheduled for an hour and we bumped up against the deadline. Sometimes it took as long as a half hour just to work through the blowback from the faculty in the home states. They wanted to know those questions that Bob raised. What's the agenda here? Why are you trying to change us? And all this. Well, midway through the conference calls, we saw a change. They became less pressure-filled, and the concerns about an external mandate sort of melted away a little bit. And we did prepare some advice for the writing teams, and I'll go over that advice for you here. The first thing, we told them to trust the process. We did have a process. We've gone through that process. Faculty doing this work. Trust faculty. Trust your colleagues. Nobody from the outside is doing this. Good teaching is local. We believe that. We assume that, and we don't want to change that. Furthermore, good assessment is local. We're not trying to tell anybody how to assess. If you look at the proficiency criteria, you'll see all kinds of different ways of assessing. And we know that it's local. We do believe that quality learning is transferable.
Right, and this did help a great deal when we became explicit about some of these fundamental assumptions of the approach we were taking. We didn't want to change anything locally. One of the fundamental operating principles in putting the passport together was that institutional individuality was to be honored and maintained. And we needed to have the faculty help us paint a picture of that local teaching and learning, just so the faculty on other campuses might see the similarities and be more accepting of transfer students. We still had a problem in getting faculty to participate freely in the writing teams. Terry, can you spend a little time telling us about the orientation information that you worked up midway through the process as we were learning about these problems? And this process that you worked out really helped to smooth the path.
Yeah, well, I had been taking notes and sort of doing a qualitative study. I've been keeping a list of issues that I saw in the earlier groups, which I started to think of as blind alleys. If we could sort of map them off and keep people from going down those. I didn't make these up. These are blind alleys that I actually saw. The first one I called looking elsewhere. The faculty had a tendency to look elsewhere for the assignments, and we didn't want them to do that. We wanted them to look at their own practice. That's what we needed to have. It's a blind alley to look somewhere else. Begging the question, saying more or less the same thing in the conclusion that you say in the premise. We don't need restatements of the learning outcomes, which I think begging the question actually is a pretty common strategy across education. Just restating the outcome. Decontextualizing the PC column, taking the PC column out of its context, that it is intended to foster communication, not to provide a mandate, not to provide requirements. Bending the passport template. We had a few, two big columns, and we had a few other elements. It's a pretty simple template, and we wanted to stick with that. You have learning outcomes, you have assignments, but some of the groups wanted to add a column here or there, and we eventually got them to stick with this template. All that glitters is not gold. We were not looking for exemplars. We didn't want, a collection of the very best assignments in somebody's utopia. We wanted assignments that are actually given so that we could help students right now, not students 20 years from now. Just like me, the proficiency criteria did not have to look just like me. I mean, we may have fought for years to get a course in the curriculum, we may have done this or that, but the criteria need to look like us, not like me. And then holding back. This wasn't a biggie, but we did see some faculty who sort of wanted to wait a little bit to see what would be out there on the table before they would share their stuff, and that stopped.
So we now have a set of proficiency criteria that's been vetted across campuses in multiple states. And we do know that that learning will evolve over time. It's not static. PLOs might change, and we can make some comments in a little bit about the ways that they might change. But Terry, can you offer us some examples of criteria for good proficiency criteria?
Yeah, there are criteria for all kinds of criteria. Here, first is that it's accessible. We did not give the faculty the requirement that they use any particular language. It just needed to be accessible. Needed to be appropriate for lower division GE. I think we got a couple bullets there, Bob. Needed to be legitimate. These are actual things that are used. Representative, like dead center in the category. Clearly connected to the learning outcome, and that can be tough to do, but that's sort of like the last check. And then currently being used.
So the proficiency criteria can actually assist some local conversations as well. Can you point out ways that that might happen, Terry?
Yeah, I think these criteria can serve as anchors for what I call collaborative instructional conversations. If you are a receiving institution taking students into upper division, your faculty could have a discussion about the kinds and difficulty level of academic work expected of transfer students. What should they have done in preparation for upper division work? Has your faculty had that discussion apart from the passport? And then do we see this kind of level in the passport proficiency criteria? Sending institutions, how do we prepare and assess our students for upper division expectations? And are we making assignments and using assessments commensurate with the proficiency criteria? And you can see that this could apply the third grade teachers and the fourth grade teachers, the lower division teachers and the upper division teachers. These are conversations that need to go on within institutions and across institutions.
Right. So, and one of the things that needs to happen if an institution is going to think about becoming a passport institution is they need to put together a block of learning opportunities that address the every one of the passport learning outcomes. And the passport block will consist of these educational experiences that develop proficiency. They are constructed independently by appropriate faculty at each passport institution, and a student earns the passport by completing the entire passport block. The PLOs are agreements that passport institutions have among themselves that and their passport block will address all of the learning outcomes. The proficiency criteria, as Terry has described, are examples of assignments that are now being used, and they can be useful in looking for courses or other educational experiences that would fit in their passport block. If you're looking at a set of proficiency criteria, it's conceivable that you're going to see something that resembles quite closely assignments that you now give in one course but not in another, and those can be indicators of courses that will be very good fit for your passport block. But they're just useful guides. They might be also useful in writing your own proficiency criteria. And finally, we repeat again that they're not required. The PC are not required. They're not recommended. They're not suggested. They are a report of what faculty at different institutions are currently doing. I mentioned earlier that there is a process that we have developed for changing the learning outcomes or proficiency criteria. And as Terry pointed out in an earlier slide, faculty own the curriculum. So this change process is also driven by faculty. There is a 3-year review cycle for all of the PLOs and the PC. So if you recall, there are 9 lower division general education areas in the passport. And 3 of those will be examined every year by the Passport Review Board for their efficacy and their continued utility, and whether there has been feedback from the field that tells us that perhaps we need to look at some of those learning outcomes with fresh eyes. So every third year, a set of 3 of those PLOs and proficiency criteria will be examined. There is also the stipulation for an out-of-cycle review. If a PLO or a PC is of particular concern to faculty across several institutions, the Passport Review Board may reconvene the faculty team for that particular part of the lower division GE for that particular area. And if the faculty team is reconvened, they'll be asked to look at the concern that has been brought forward, and they will take action, and the results of their action will then be communicated to relevant faculty. and the modifications that they might choose to make will go into all of the passport documents, handbooks, and web pages. So there have been a series of questions that have occurred as we've had these conversations, and Terry, I know you've heard some of these questions as well. Can we join the Interstate Passport if we don't use the proficiency criteria? Well, the answer should come from what we've tried to emphasize. The proficiency criteria, the specific proficiency criteria are not requirements, they're not suggestions, they simply are examples of what is currently being used. They're reports of what's currently being used. Do we have to generate our own proficiency criteria? Well, how would you answer this one, Terry?
Well, I would say they're already generated. I mean, faculty are giving assignments. It's just a matter of, do we have to collect them, I guess. I don't think they have to be written down, but they probably should be aware of what assignments they're giving.
Right. And how do we take the next step to join the passport? Well, on the part of the faculty, the next step has to be that we will look at the learning outcomes, the passport learning outcomes, and see if those learning outcomes match and are acceptable to learning outcomes in your own institution. And it's not mandatory that the learning outcomes are identical to what you have, and we're not asking any institution to adopt the passport learning outcomes, but they need to see them as being consistent with learning outcomes that are acceptable to them for students that transfer into their institutions. And of course, I just answered this question, do we have to adopt the passport learning outcomes? No, you do not. But they do need to be seen as consistent, they need to be congruent, they need to be a currency that students can carry from any passport institution into you. And if we join the passport, can we leave at any time? Well, in order to join the passport, it's necessary for an institution to sign a memorandum of understanding, a memorandum of agreement, and that runs for a period of 5 years. So once you're committed for a 5-year period. Now what? Find places to use the passport in conversations that are already occurring. I've been contacted by bodies in a couple of states and asked to come and talk about the passport, because the passport conversation is one that can enrich conversations that are going on independent of the passport with respect to transfer, with respect to general education, with respect to establishing learning outcomes, and with respect to assessments. Take the next step. Is there a match between the passport and the aspirations that you as an institution have for general education, looking at your general education program, for examining the efficacy and the efficiency of transfer, for getting a handle on whether or not the students that transfer out of your institution are doing well at their new institutions? Look at the passport, see if there's a match. And finally, become a member. We encourage you to very strongly consider doing so. We have a number of resources that are available. There are two handbooks that address directly the conversation that we've had today. One of those is a handbook, faculty handbook on the Interstate Passport learning outcomes. The second one is a handbook on the learning outcomes and the proficiency criteria. And the third is a handbook that came out in July 2016 on constructing your institution's passport block. And all of these resources are available in PDF format at the passport website, which is www.witchy.edu/passport. And finally, I want to emphasize again that there are a series of webinars that are being presented this summer and early this fall. alluded to the first two, introducing the passport, the second being the overview for registrars and institutional researchers, and the third, the one that you have just heard today, the role of the transfer level proficiency criteria in the new framework. The fourth will be provided by Doug Shapiro from the National Student Clearinghouse on September 29th, and this focuses on student mobility and transfer. And I need to emphasize that the National Student Clearinghouse is the agency that is going to be collecting data on the students that have been awarded passports, the movement of those students from one institution to another, and the success of those students once they have changed institutions. At this point, I would like to express my gratitude to Terry Underwood for today's webinar, but my gratitude to him goes far beyond that, because what you have heard from Terry today is just the tip of the iceberg that he contributed to the Passport initiative and the development of the Passport. I have been enriched by my interactions with Terry, and I'm sure that he will continue to be a resource that the Passport can call on in the future. And Terry, thank you very much for an excellent job today.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate that.
And with that, I will go to the final slide, which shows methods by which you can contact us. And at this point, I would like to call on Kate Springsteen, who is the organizer of this webinar, to see if there are questions that we might answer. But before turning it over to Kate, the last thing I would like to do is to thank all of you who have attended the webinar and encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity to learn more about the Passport by going to the WICHE website and looking at the materials that are posted there, and in particular the series of 4 webinars and the handbooks that are posted. So thank you very much for taking the time to attend, and Kate, I now ask you if there are questions that Terry and I can address.
All right. Well, great webinar to both of you. Currently there are no questions listed, but why don't we take a couple of minutes to see if there are any questions that come up. If you would like to raise a question, please write it into the questions panel, and I'll bring it to Bob and Terry's attention. Okay, so I have a question. It says, how long typically should an institution set aside to go through the discussion process to become passport compliant?
Well, we're experiencing something on the order of at least a half an academic year, if not the entire year. And the major pieces of work are to have the faculty in each of these lower division general education areas look at the learning outcomes and determine whether or not they are acceptable. Once they have done so, it's then a matter of putting together a passport block, a matter for the faculty to do that. And that can take several weeks. It depends on, to a large extent, on the faculty culture. That is, are we able to set aside our previous experience with courses and credits and focus on the learning outcomes as the important currency. Once that has been accomplished, then the administration needs to take a look at the memorandum of agreement, and the registrars need to become familiar with the process of recording the passport on students' academic record, and with the process of sending the academic progress tracking reports to the National Student Clearinghouse. And at that point, the institution is pretty much done with the work necessary to become a member of the Passport. There then are resources that are available for the advisors to avail themselves of in order to make students aware of the Passport and the steps that the student needs to go through to complete the Passport. So I would estimate anywhere from a half to a full academic year to go through the process. And of course, if you're interested in that, please contact one of the people whose names you see on the screen in front of you now, and we're very willing and able to provide assistance, get a picture of where your institution is now, and expedite the process for you. Additional questions, Kate?
There are none right now, but I'd like to give everyone another minute in case they're typing the question.
Okie dokie.
Well, I don't think we're going to receive any more questions for this particular webinar. So I think that we are all done for the day. Thank you again to Bob and Terry for this great webinar. And the webinar will be available on the website. I'll send out an email to everybody who's participated and signed up at where you can access the webinar, the recorded version of it. And I will also be sending out a link for a survey, and we'd really appreciate it, as Bob mentioned at the beginning, if you could fill this survey out. So thanks to everybody who joined us for the call today. We hope you join us for future calls as well.
Thanks very much, Kate. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.